The Bible Study Podcast, episode 257. Today, the Bible Study Podcast continues the study of 2 Samuel with chapter 15. Welcome to the Bible Study Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. We continue the study of 2 Samuel, chapter 15, and Absalom's conspiracy. In the course of time, Absalom provided himself with a chariot and horses and with 50 men to run ahead of him. He would get up early and stand by the side of the road leading to the city gate. Whenever anyone came with a complaint to be placed before the king for a decision, Absalom would call out to him, "What town are you from?" He would answer, "Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel." Then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your claims are valid and proper, but there is no representative of the king to hear you." And Absalom would add, "If only I were appointed judge in the land, then everyone who had a complaint or case could come to me, and I would see that they receive justice." Also, whenever anyone approached him to bow down before him, Absalom would reach out his hand, take hold of him, and kiss him. Absalom behaved in this way towards all the Israelites who came to the king asking for justice, and so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel. At the end of 4 years, Absalom said to the king, "Let me go to Hebron and fulfill a vow I made to the Lord. While your servant was living at Geshur in Aram, I made this vow: if the Lord takes me back to Jerusalem, I will worship the Lord in Hebron." The king said to him, "Go in peace." So he went to Hebron. Then Absalom sent secret messengers throughout the tribes of Israel to say, "As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpets, then say, 'Absalom is king in Hebron.'" 200 men from Jerusalem had accompanied Absalom. They had been invited as guests and went innocently, knowing nothing about the matter. While Absalom was offering sacrifices, he also sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor, to come from Gilo, his hometown, and so the conspiracy gained strength, and Absalom's following kept on increasing. Remember, Absalom is the one who his sister was raped by his half-brother, and so he kills his half-brother, goes into exile, is brought back to Jerusalem, and then David is convinced that he should reconnect with his son. And this is the thanks he gets. This son is now conspiring against his throne. Absalom has ingratiated the people by basically insinuating that David isn't going to give them justice, because everybody who comes to get justice, he intercepts them and says, "Oh, gee, it's a shame that you came to get justice because you can't get it here. There's no one to listen to you. If only I were king. If only I were the judge. If only I was able to give you justice. But I'm afraid I can't." And so he does this for 4 years, giving everybody the impression that there is no justice in Israel, and there won't be until he is king. It's a very shrewd move. Obviously, it's also very devious. And all this time, he's conspiring against his father, and his father who has made peace with him. And so he now goes to Hebron, and he gathers messengers, and they're ready to stage a coup of David. They're ready to take David's throne from him. A messenger came and told David, "The hearts of the people of Israel are with Absalom." Then David said to all his officials who were with him in Jerusalem, "Come, we must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. We must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin on us and put the city to the sword." The king's officials answered him, "Your servants are ready to do whatever our lord the king chooses." The king set out with his entire household following him, but he left 10 concubines to take care of the palace. So the king set out with all the people following him, and they halted at the edge of the city. All his men marched past him, along with all the Kerethites and Pelethites, and all the 600 Gittites who had accompanied him from Gath, marching before the king. The king told to Ittai the Gittite, "Why should you come along with us? Go back and stay with King Absalom. You are a foreigner and exile from your homeland. You came only yesterday, and today shall I make you wander about with us when I do not know where I am going. Go back and take your people with you. May the Lord show you kindness and faithfulness." But Ittai replied to the king, "As surely as the Lord lives, as my lord the king lives, wherever my lord the king may be, whether it mean life or death, there will your servant be." David said to Ittai, "Go ahead, march on." So Ittai the Gittite marched on with all his men and the families that were with him. The whole countryside wept aloud as the people passed by. The king also crossed the Kidron Valley, and all the people moved on toward the wilderness. So this is an act strangely reminiscent for David because David is going back into the wilderness. Remember that David spent time in the wilderness fleeing from Saul after Samuel had anointed him king of Israel, but while Saul was still king, David had to flee from Saul and spent time in the wilderness with a small band of loyal followers. And again, at this point, David is heading back to the wilderness with a small band of loyal followers. So despite the fact that he has been a pretty good king, we said he had some trouble with his sons. He had trouble seeing justice in that situation, but he's been a pretty good king, and things have been very good for Israel under his kingship. But at this point, the hearts of many of the people, and we can see in this particular passage, not all of them, is with his son. And so the not all of them replies to two different things. One is we get Ittai the Gittite, who is one of those people who represents the people who are faithful to David. And he, in fact, is told by David, this really isn't your fight. You're not from here. Why don't you go back? I don't even know whether I'm going to live or die. And he says, I'm your man. I'm going to be with you whatever happens. Live or die, success or failure, wilderness or palace, I'm with you. And that is the kind of faithfulness that a king is going to need, especially a king who is going off into exile. And notice also, the whole countryside is weeping aloud as he passes by. We've had David chased down by Saul, and then when Saul died, we had a time of civil war, and we're heading back to a time of civil war. And even if you are a fan of Absalom, this is not a good time for the kingdom. This is a time, again, of civil war, of brother fighting against brother. And so it isn't necessarily even that people are sad that David's leaving, but that people are sad that they're going through this time. Although certainly some of these people are expressing their fondness for David as they weep as they see him leaving. Zadok was there too, and all the Levites who were with him were carrying the ark of the covenant of God. They set down the ark of God, and Abiathar offered sacrifices until all the people had finished leaving the city. Then the king said to Zadok, "Take the ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the Lord's eyes, he will bring me back and let me see it in his dwelling place again. But if he says, I am not pleased with you, then I am ready. Let him do to me whatever seems good to him." The king also said to Zadok the priest, "Do you understand? Go back to the city with my blessing. Take your son Ahimaaz with you, and also Abiathar's son Jonathan. You and Abiathar return with your two sons, and I will wait at the fords in the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me." So Zadok and Abiathar took the ark of God back to Jerusalem and stayed there. But David continued up the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head was covered, and he was barefoot. All the people with him covered their heads too, and were weeping as they went up. Now David had been told, "Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom." So David prayed, "Lord, turn Ahithophel's counsel into foolishness." When David arrived at the summit where the people used to worship God, Hushai the Archite was there to meet him, his robe torn and dust on his head. David said to him, "If you go with me, you will be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, 'Your Majesty, I will be your servant. I was your father's servant in the past, but now I will be your servant,' then you can help me by frustrating Ahithophel's advice. Won't the priests Zadok and Abiathar be there with you? Tell them anything you hear in the king's palace. Their two sons, Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, and Jonathan, son of Abiathar, are there with them. Send them to me with anything you hear." So Hushai, David's confidant, arrived at Jerusalem as Absalom was entering the city. And so we see that David is also shrewd. David is setting up his friends and putting them in place where he can get word. And he's trying to send his counselors back in a place where they can whisper in Absalom's ears to see if he can thwart wise counsel and try and give counsel that is foolish to Absalom. And so we leave this chapter and this episode of the Bible Study Podcast with David going back into exile and back into the wilderness. And we have to remember that some of this David has brought on himself. Some of this sounds like the prophecy that Nathan the prophet said after the whole incident with Bathsheba and David and having Uriah killed. And so David may have brought this on himself. And we certainly have David not sure, because David says to them, take the ark of the Lord and put it back in the city. If I find favor in God's eyes, then I'll get to see it again. But if not, then the Lord do with me what he wills. David doesn't know for sure how this is going to end at this point. He doesn't, like the first time, have a promise that he's going to be king, even if that's a difficult promise to hold on to. He has no word at this point how this will end. And we'll see how it ends over here over the next week or two. With that, we're going to end this episode of the Bible Study Podcast. If you have any questions, feel free to send an email to host@thebiblestudypodcast.com or leave a comment on this episode at thebiblestudypodcast.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Chris2X. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
And one by one, I watched my dear friends get engaged, get married, start having children. And especially as a woman, I felt like there was a certain timeline that these things needed to happen in my life.
Charity Gale shares a personal testimony on The Walk, a podcast for worshipers. Join us weekly to hear songwriters, worship leaders, filmmakers, and other creatives tell their stories in the form of a devotional. The Walk can be found on lifeaudio.com or your favorite podcast platform.